Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can I ask that you come to order, please? Thank you. For those I haven't had the opportunity to meet, my name is Warren Kerr, and in my role as the Warden of Convocation this evening, I'll be chairing our proceedings. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the second ordinary meeting of our centenary year of 2013. I'd particularly like to welcome our guest speaker, His Honour Justice James Edelman, former Chancellor Professor Alex Cohen, Professor Alec Cameron, the Acting Senior Deputy Vice-Chancellor of UWA, Mr Cameron Barnes, the Guild President, Ms Brenda Tournier, the new Associate Director for Alumni Relations and Community Engagement, Mr Paul McCann, the Deputy Warden of Convocation, Council Members of Convocation and Council-elected Senators, as well as all the members, obviously, of Convocation, including their guests and friends. Welcome, one and all. It's the custom of the University to recognise that our activities take place on Noongar land and that the Noongar people are the spiritual and cultural custodians of this land, where they continue to practice their values, beliefs and languages. So, I will now declare the meeting open at 6:01 and note that I have apologies from the Chancellor, Dr Michael Chaney, former Chancellor and Governor, Dr Ken Michael, Vice-Chancellor, Professor Paul Johnson, and over 500 other members of Convocation. Given the number of events that are on in the University Club this evening, I'm glad that the other 500 didn't try to join us. Can I ask if anyone wishes to propose apologies that have not been recorded electronically or through the office?
Mr Paul Nichols.
Paul Nichols? Thank you very much, Ian. In that case, I'll move to item 1 on the agenda, which is outlined in the booklet that you have received. The minutes of the first ordinary meeting held on Friday, the 15th of March 2013, which appear at attachment A of the booklet for this meeting. Are there any amendments to the minutes? If not, as required under item 2, can I ask someone who attended the first ordinary meeting to move acceptance of the minutes? Fran? Thank you. Dr Fran Pesic? And someone to second that motion? Thank you very much, Dr Susan King. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried. Can I now move to item 3 on the agenda, business arising from the minutes? You will note that at the first ordinary meeting, a member of Convocation, Mr Michael Kyle, indicated he was still waiting on a response to a query he had raised at the ordinary meeting held in September 2012. This related to the use of the UWA logo on a website, Shaping Tomorrow's World. As I was unaware of that issue, having only been elected Warden at the last meeting, I have contacted Mr Kyle and facilitated a response from the Acting Director of Public Affairs for the University, Ms Janine McDonald. She's advised that as this website is not a university site and as UWA is not an affiliated organisation, she will be contacting those responsible for the site to advise them that the logo and affiliation reference should be deleted. If there are no other matters arising from the previous ordinary meeting, our next item of business for this evening is item 4, correspondence. While Convocation receives enough correspondence to warrant its own post office, in my view, I just wish to bring on one item of correspondence for your attention as it relates to the conduct and recording of these meetings. Following the first ordinary meeting, I received a letter from Dr Bruce Hartley, who requested that consideration be given to video recording the proceedings so that members who are no longer resident in Perth or who may have been unable to attend could still receive an update on the university's activities. Prior to receiving Dr Hartley's letter, Convocation had made arrangements to have an audio recording of each meeting, which was then posted on the Convocation website. However, I'm now pleased to report that Convocation Council has now made arrangements to have video recordings made of all future ordinary meetings commencing this evening with the welcome assistance of Corporate Theatre. This video recording will be available on our website in the next week or so, along with the other videos explaining the role and function of Convocation. If you haven't visited the Convocation website lately, I would encourage you to do so. The website address is located at the bottom of the page of your agenda, and it's recently been revised to make it more user-friendly and to provide ready access to information and events. We now come to item 5, the Vice-Chancellor's report, which appears at attachment B. Given that the Vice-Chancellor is unable to be with us this evening, this will be presented by the Acting Senior Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Professor Alec Cameron. Please welcome Professor Cameron.
Thank you, Warren. Ladies and gentlemen, members of Convocation, this is actually the first meeting of Convocation I have been able to attend, having only joined the university at the start of this year, so I might start by saying it's a great pleasure and privilege to be able to attend this meeting and report to you on behalf of the Vice-Chancellor. The Vice-Chancellor's report is provided within the papers for tonight's meeting, so it's not my intention to read that report. I'm happy to pick out some highlights from the report and share those with you. And Warden, if it's the custom and norm, I'm happy to take questions at the end. If that's not the norm, then I'm happy not to take questions. But if it is the norm, then I'm happy to see what I can do in terms of any questions offered. Can I start off by talking about what was the first item that the Vice-Chancellor identified in the report, which was the academic ranking of world universities. Now, I think everyone would be aware that there was a lot of celebration at this university a bit over 12 months ago when we were rated within this ranking, which is usually referred to as the Shanghai Jiaotong ranking, in the world's top 100. And that was seen to be the achievement of a goal that the university had set some years previously to seek to be considered one of the world's top 100 universities by the time of its centenary. And the university was very pleased to identify the achievement of that goal. So obviously there was, I think it's fair to say, some interest, nervousness, on behalf of the university as that ranking, which is made every year, came up again to see whether the university was still living up to its claim of being a world top 100 university. We were thrilled, suffice to say, to see that our ranking had gone up from 96 to 91, and that our ranking within the Australian universities, of which there are 5 in the top 100, we'd previously been the 5th ranked. We moved into the 4th position because we leapfrogged over the University of Sydney. The only universities in Australia above us on the list are now the University of Melbourne, the Australian National University and the University of Queensland. So it's, I think, very gratifying for the university to think that the achievement of the goal of being in the top 100 by its centenary has been maintained, and we continue to make progress, and our overall objective of being in the top 50 universities in the world by 2050, well, suffice to say we continue to make progress towards that goal. There is a big difference between 91 and 50 in the ranking when we look at the quality of universities between us and that goal. But at the same time, this university, if we continue to improve year on year, then I suspect that the next 37 years give us ample opportunity to achieve that goal. Another item that the Vice-Chancellor made reference to is the UWA Gives Back program. In our centenary year, there has been a desire on behalf of the university to engage broadly with the West Australian community, to recognise that the founding of this university was that it would be a university for the state, and that whilst we are almost exclusively located in Perth, that we have an interest and engagement with the regions through the state, and the consequence of that is that on a faculty by faculty basis there have been visits planned to different parts of Western Australia. And the objectives of those have usually been both to promote the work of the university, its education, its scholarship and its research in those regions, and also in almost all instances to make visits to schools in those regions, which are often underrepresented in terms of their participation in higher education, and bring awareness and we hope aspiration to young people, to students at those schools, to realise the opportunities and the support that this university provides to students from regional areas to come to the University of Western Australia. So that's been a well worthwhile activity. The Vice-Chancellor has been able to participate in some of those trips. I was also fortunate to be able to attend the trip with the business school up to the Pilbara, and suffice to say, not only did we visit Karratha and Newman and Port Hedland, but we visited the senior high schools in each of those towns, and as I said, their participation in higher education generally is very low. The number of students from those schools who may come to this university is usually counted on the fingers of one hand. So it was a great opportunity for us to talk to and engage with those students about what university would mean, and by engaging with them, not in their final year, we're talking often with students in year 9 to try and give them the opportunity to aim up and aspire to joining this university. Other things that have been made reference to, there's a reference to the university signing up with Coursera. Those of you who have been following a lot of the discussion in the higher education media would be aware of a phenomenon called MOOCs, which are massive open online courses. This phenomenon is about universities, and some of the leading universities in the world, offering free online courses. Given that the university has resourcing problems, how we have the means to offer free online courses as a sector is interesting, but nonetheless it's an increasing phenomenon, and it's one in some sense which is both technology enabled but also is responsive to the fact that there are a lot of people who will not be students of this university but are still interested in engaging in some of the learning that universities can provide. Coursera is one of the leading platforms in the United States at the forefront of that activity. They're reasonably selective in their membership. We as a university have chosen to join that platform along with the University of Melbourne and the University of New South Wales, and as I said, many of the leading universities in North America and Europe. And our objectives are twofold. One is to use that platform to promote this university internationally, both within academic and non-academic circles, conscious of the fact that we feel that some of the rankings of this university, which are based on international surveys, sometimes don't reflect the quality of the performance, the metrics that are based more on counting some of the research metrics we tend to score quite well. Those which are based on familiarity surveys we tend not to do so well. So one of the ways of closing that gap is to raise our profile, to raise our international recognition. We see this strategy as part of that. But there's also another consideration, which is that we see that technology is going to play an increasing role in the future in enriching and complementing what we do in the classroom, and that the opportunity to participate in online education is a way of improving our learning and understanding of how education will be delivered in some part in the future. The Vice-Chancellor's report also makes reference to university funding. We are, I think it's fair to say, as a sector challenged with cutbacks in federal funding. The problem, I think, for the universities across the sector, in the absence of that federal funding growth, we are not growing our revenues in some sense in line with what have traditionally been the increase in our costs. So the challenge, of course, is either to reduce our expenditure, which usually comes at some pain, or find other ways to grow our revenue, to work out how to bring more funding in the university to not only continue the quality of our existing activities and operations, but also to pursue the many exciting new opportunities which are in front of us, but most of which come with a price tag. Related to that, the Vice-Chancellor has given some outline of his initiative called UWA 2020, Preparing for Success, which is, I think suffice to say, has a couple of elements to it. It's a change project within the university which is looking at both some organisational realignment around the central portfolios within the university, but following those will be what are being referred to as functional reviews, which is looking at many of the support functions in the university and how they're delivered. We tend to have a model which involves both some centralisation and some devolution of activities, leading in many cases perhaps to duplication and inefficiency. And clearly, if we have to make some savings in the university, if we can be more efficient with our support operations and be able to maintain the level of resourcing for our academic activities, that's probably the best outcome. I think that might do in terms of highlights that I'll draw attention to. As I said, I'm very happy to take questions on any items. The fact that I haven't covered all the topics isn't because they're not important, but at the same time I'm conscious there are other items, including an outstanding guest speaker on the agenda, so I don't want to hold you up from that. But if there are any questions on anything I've said or anything else on the Vice-Chancellor's report or any other matters, Warren, I'm happy to take those questions.
Any questions?
One question.
Yeah.
You mentioned with the international rankings,
Yeah.
obviously you refer to a particular ranking, but in general, would you say what's required to get into the top 50 is a bit of everything across the board, or are there certain things that really need to be targeted?
Look, the ranking we refer to, which is the academic ranking of world universities, is almost exclusively a research ranking. I think as a university we have seen that in some sense at the moment as the gold standard in terms of rankings, but at the same time our aspiration to be in the top 50 universities by 2015 we've always said is broader than just being in, ranked purely on research. So I think it's interesting because setting a goal saying we want to be in the top 50, the first question someone might ask is, well, which ranking are you referring to? And I think there's no certainty that any ranking that exists today, given they've all only existed for about 5 to 10 years, may not exist in 37 years' time. So we are, I think it's fair to say, looking at the best universities in the world, the universities that are commonly recognised against most of the rankings as being in the top 50, and try to identify what are they doing in terms of their research, what are they doing in terms of their teaching and their student experience, what are they doing in terms of community engagement, what are they doing in terms of the operational efficiencies of those universities, which represent models that we should seek to emulate. So our aspiration is broad, and I suppose it could be said slightly, I won't say vaguely defined, but because, once again, I think by 2050, the current rankings probably won't be in existence and we'll be looking for some more meaningful metric.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Professor, conspicuously missing from Vice-Chancellor's report is anything about the centenary year other than some gifts that have been received from various people. Are you able to say whether or not the university is well satisfied or otherwise with the centenary year?
Okay. Look, I think it's fair to say the year started off with significant celebration, of course, which was Luminous Night, and I hope many people in this room had the opportunity to participate in that event, which was not only, I think, a spectacular showcase of the university, but I think we had something of the order of 40,000 people actually come on the campus that day in, I think it was February. So we started off the year with a big bang. We've got, as I said, the activities in the university in terms of engagement with the state, and that's been at a faculty level and it has involved a range of visits. Fundraising is referred to in terms of some gifts here, but there will be shortly the announcement and launch of, let me say, the university's campaign associated with substantial fundraising in association with the centenary. So, and of course, hopefully that will give us the means to do the, I suppose I'd say the significant buildings or other initiatives which would flow from that. So at this stage it's been, I think, as I said, I think the year got off to a fantastic start. I think there's a lot of engagement activities that are now part of it, and we're now looking to say, well, we need to use this opportunity, use this celebration, use this milestone as a means to, to garner the funds which will enable us to realise visions which should be in line with the aspiration of celebrating 100 years of achievement.
With the local government boundary changes, will there be any possibility of that tract of land that Edelman's council has blocked development over the years bequeathed in the 30s, I think?
Okay, so I'm not certain which block of land is it. Which is this the one?
Every convocation discussion about.
Okay, so apologies, I'm not certain which, but I think one of the university hasn't been, let me say, passive in terms of the boundary changes. I think the university was quite public that we were keen to see if there were to be local boundary realignments in the city of Perth, in Perth, that the university would come into one jurisdiction, and the consequence of that is the government has announced that we will be completely, our land will be complete, or at least this campus will be completely within the city of Perth, which means that we will be subject to planning from the city of Perth, and I think our expectation is they may be more empathetic to the needs and consideration of the university than, I need to be careful what I say. I was going to say the suburban councils to which we've previously been subject. And apologies if I said anything I shouldn't have said there, but So I think we are hopeful that we'll have a more benign planning environment.
At least one thing we can hope for is that the boundary of the local government areas won't go down the centre of Winthrop Hall. Any further questions? One up in the centre there.
But regarding the boundaries,
Yeah.
I mean, when I first heard that the Perth Council was determined to bring in these, not just university, but several fairly illustrious institutions, I'm not sure why they wanted to do it, but I have a feeling I could guess why. How did the discussion and reaction go? I mean, were you in meetings say, oh, this is fantastic, yes, please take us? Or did you think it through very, very carefully? Because we could be on a winner, we could be on a loser in this respect.
Look, once again, I wasn't personally involved in the discussions. My understanding is that the university would have only been expressing an opinion on the university's land. I think we felt that we were not in a good position where we had council boundaries intersecting on the university campus and hence being subject to multiple jurisdictions. I think we felt that a city council would be more, as I said before, empathetic and understanding of some of the planning issues that a world-scale university would be facing, and hence, to the extent that we were able to express an opinion, the opinion we expressed is we would favour a reallocation of boundaries which brought the University of Western Australia into the boundary of the City of Perth.
Because it would then put the university under one boundary.
Because it would put us under one boundary, and we felt that a city council rather than, once again apologies, what I'd call a suburban council would probably be more empathetic to the considerations of an entity such as a university.
Did they put a case for that entity that they would show empathy towards you? Did they put a case for that?
Look, I think there has been, well, as I said, we sit partly within the City of Perth already, so that at the moment, as I said, we are subject to multiple jurisdictions. There would have been discussions with the City of Perth about the expectations of the university.
Any further questions?
Is this an opportunity to ask questions that are unrelated to the Chancellor's report?
I don't know who's going to win tomorrow night, was that the question?
I noticed on my way today the absence of ACROD days.
I'm sorry?
ACROD days, the disabled parking days. Disabled parking days.
I think we might bring that up under other business if we may.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Okay, thank you. If there are no further questions, I'll thank Alec very much for his presentation. The next item on our agenda tonight is the report of the Guild President. I'd like to ask Cameron Barnes to come forward and present that for us. Please welcome Cameron.
Thanks for that, Warren. It's my absolute honour and privilege to come and speak here tonight to so many interested faces. Before I deliver my report, and I won't go over too much content that I've already put in there, I just had a little bit of a think about what the Guild means to members of Convocation such as yourselves. And I suppose in order to achieve that, I had to think about what the university means to all of you and what it will mean to me when I graduate. And I suppose a lot of that is tied to identity. You all hold a UWA degree, and I will hopefully at one stage, if I ever get out of student politics, hold a UWA degree. And what's really important is not just the university and its reputation, but the value of that degree and what it means to each and every one of us. And the role that I really see for the Guild is to push progress, to push for that degree to mean as much as possible, and to push for a university which consistently extends the boundaries of our society. And there's a great quote that I delivered at a teaching and learning address a few months back from this great English writer, which said that education is the way that the soul of a society is transferred from one generation to another. And I think that's so true when I think about my student experience and what I've really gained so far. So this year in the Guild, it's really been about two things. The first is this idea of how we can be a partner of the university, how we can align our strategic direction, how we can develop an operational plan that taps into areas where collaboration between students, the university administration, and bodies such as Convocation can deliver real outcomes to students, the university, researchers, and the community. The second is how we challenge the status quo, how we push for new ideas and for boundaries to become extended. And it's really reflected in that the two stories I always like to tell are two stories, one of help and one of challenge. I like to tell of how way back in 1931, when Winthrop Hall was being commissioned, we found out just days before a major international benefactor was due to arrive that the reflection pond wasn't going to be built on time because the university ran out of money. And when the university rocked up the next day, what did they see but engineering students affiliated with the guild, fully dressed out in their academic robes, digging the pond. And a photo of those students digging the pond sits in the Vice-Chancellor as well as my office as a symbol of the ongoing partnership between students and the university. We're in it together. But I also think about the story of Sue Boyd, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and how in 1969, when she was guild president and 2 students died while crossing Stirling Highway, she decided to lead a protest, a sit-in on Stirling Highway, and it raised so much ire of the community, and in fact I think the local council were particularly concerned when students started trying to dig their own underpass, that it eventually wound up with the first of the many underpasses that we now have today. And so this year that's what we've really tried to do. The first thing that we've implemented is the idea of partnership. For the first time in the Guild's history, we now have an operational priorities plan that is being developed aligned with the universities. We've gone through and asked ourselves how we can become a partner. And a really good example of that is service learning, which is something that I've covered in my report. And it's something really close to my heart because the way I see it, education isn't just a way of getting a job or earning income. It's about accepting that it's an immense privilege and an opportunity to give back to the community. And for me, service learning is what puts that education in context. The university, when it implemented new courses, identified service learning as a key priority, and it's something that the Guild has been very eager to support. With the development of our Guild Volunteering Hub, this year we've actively reached out to faculty societies to implement skilled volunteering programs. Things like law students getting out there and doing research for the Ethnic Disabilities Advocacy Centre, science students going and working with the City of Melville on science education, even paediatric medicine students going out and undertaking work for homeless people with foot problems. All of that stuff we're now getting engaged in. And then on top of that, we've been in a really unique position where we've used our shared resources to partner with the university. And the manager of the Guild Volunteer Hub now has 2 hats. On a 0.5 basis, he's the manager of the Guild Volunteering Hub, and on a 0.5 basis, he's paid by the university to use our shared resources to coordinate new service learning units. And for me, that's really the way of the future. The Guild and the university hand in hand, finding ways to improve the student experience. But at the same time, we're also here to challenge the status quo. We're also here to be the ones that push the issues that matter to students. And as Alec mentioned, when we look at being the top 50 university in the world, it's incredibly important to think beyond just research. And that's one of the things that we've been pushing so hard this year. The question that we want to ask is, what does the student experience, the teaching and learning look like at a top 50 university? And how do we get there? And that's something that we've put in our long-term strategic direction. And I've been immensely encouraged by just how open Alec and the rest of University Executive have been to the Student Guild's input, particularly on things like the UWA Education Futures project, which comes out of the Vice-Chancellor's first proposal in his UWA Futures document. We've also pushed on just about everything to do with the student experience and what it means to be a student. In terms of environmental sustainability, this year alone, we've reduced our carbon emissions by 20% through undertaking projects like an energy audit, through finding more sustainable ways for us to get rid of our waste. And of course, we've recently put a proposal up to invest $100,000 in solar panels for 30 kilowatt hours of solar electricity to fund the Student Guild Refectory. And that 20% shift is momentous because it puts us in a position where we can get out in front of the university and become more sustainable than the university and say, hey, come on guys, catch up to us. And that's certainly what a lot of national unions around the world have really done. They've been leaders in areas of social, environmental and economic progress, of students looking towards the future. And as our illustrious guest speaker will get up later to talk about the development of online technology, it's worth briefly mentioning that that's an area that we're incredibly interested in as well. Because when we talk about the student experience, it's quite important to think about both the challenges and the opportunities presented in an online context. And I won't speak too much on this topic because I'm particularly interested in hearing his insights. But I think that what we've really found interesting is that student demands are changing. More and more students are working during the week, are finding that they are used to accessing information online more. And what we really have to think about is how we develop a student experience that is so immersive, that focuses resources exactly where they need to be focused, and uses technology not to cut costs or to replace traditional means of education, but to find ways of harnessing that technology to deliver much more intense student experience, despite a model where we're seeing universities receive significantly less funding. And that's, I suppose, the thing that I wanted to finish on this year. What we've seen, unfortunately, is that now on both sides of the aisle in federal politics, students are no longer seen as a political force, something to be afraid of. And we've seen huge cuts to not only the higher education funding of universities, but also to the student income support that's particularly significant for students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. And a lot of the research now shows that one of the key barriers to education as a driver of social mobility isn't just the course costs themselves, but the associated costs of students, particularly from rural areas, moving to the city and supporting themselves when their family might not be able to provide them adequate support. And so we've been a very active affiliate of the National Union of Students, fighting cuts to higher education, pushing for students to make their voice heard. And I think that that's an incredibly important thing. So I'd like to thank you all for hearing me tonight. And as in the same vein as Alec, I'm very happy to take any questions that anyone might have.
Do we have any questions? I think you'll agree that the 100th Guild President is across most of the issues. Any questions? If not, thank you. I'm sorry. My apologies.
Mr. President, can I ask you, given that Convocation itself doesn't appear to have tremendous success in drawing students or recent graduates to attend Convocation, is it possible that the Guild has strategies to include or promote student representation or recent graduate attendance in matters of Convocation?
That's a fantastic question. In fact, one of the first things that Warren did upon his election was get in contact with me, and we arranged to meet up with himself and other senior members of Convocation Council to discuss this very point. And I think the simple answer is partnership, not just on things like the Matilda Award, where I've been very lucky to work with senior members of Convocation, but also to think about how we use things like the Postgraduate Students Association and the new courses structure, where we'll have a lot of postgraduate students coming through the university still in a coursework context and wanting to be very active on campus. It's how we use those changes to our advantage. And certainly for me, a lot of it comes back to the simple promotion. Students knowing what Convocation is, how significant it is, and what it can mean to them. And one of the reforms that we've really tried to make this year is to pull postgraduate students into the Guild much more closely. For a long time, there's been quite a strict separation of coursework, undergraduate students over here, and sort of HDR students over here. But what we're finding now is that there's no longer this very strict separation. Students like myself, who I'm a 6th year law arts student, I'm an undergraduate coursework student, but under the new courses model, I'm going to be a postgraduate. And hopefully, people in those circumstances will be active members of Convocation. So what we've really done is include much more of those representative structures within the Guild. So Education Council, for example, which used to be the predominantly undergraduate-focused faculty societies, has now reformed itself to take PSA faculty representatives and a newly created Postgraduate Students Association representative position within that. And Education Council as a body can really, I think, do a lot more to engage with Convocation. So there's a lot that I think we need to do from our end to improve our own representative structures and how well we engage, particularly postgraduate students. And I think we need to be doing a lot of the legwork in terms of promoting Convocation and what it means to our members. And certainly I can see from Warren a real passion and drive to certainly from his end make that happen as well. So thanks for the question.
Catherine, unlike Warren, I won't call you the 100th, I'm going to just call you the centenary, because some of us can actually count. I would love to just make a little promotional thank you very much to the Guild. If people, I brought my copy in case some of you haven't seen it. The Guild's history is just terrific. There's some wonderful photos in it, and thank you for making it possible, however you cleverly got the funds together. Some of us, of course, old enough to prefer books rather than reading online. And I just think to be able to get this book for only $20 is a coup. So I think you could have a huge display out there flogging them at after the meeting.
Any further questions? Yes,
First of all, look, I'd like to congratulate you on the service learning. I think that as an initiative is superb. So well done, especially bringing in the different groups, etc., to carry that out. Referring down with the engaging of underrepresented students of the report. As regards part-time students, I'm now part-time. I'm one of the HDRs. I've found the part-time experience has been very good coming back, but there's been gaps. And I was wondering, with regard to the part-time students, has there been an initiative to improve things? I'll give you one tiny example. My one unit was scheduled for day X, so my work gave me leave for day X. 2 weeks before I start, because somebody had childcare, it was moved to day Y. So I couldn't attend any seminars for a whole semester, and it had to be done simply by emails or occasional pop in to see a lecturer. Being mature, of course, I could cope with that, but it's not the same thing. So with part-time students, how do you think the representation really is?
Sure. Another great question. I think there are really two ways to address this particular problem. One is engagement and the other is representative structures, and they're two things that we've focused on really strongly this year. Obviously, there's a big issue in terms of engagement. It's much easier to engage with a first-year art student who's sitting on Oak Lawn every day than it is with a, particularly part-time students who aren't on campus as much. How do we need to do that? One of the things we've done is through trying to improve the online accessibility to our services. So, for example, Student Assist is the team responsible for addressing issues that you just mentioned, where there's been potentially some problems with academic policy or a student rights issue, or there's been a student disadvantaged by a decision made, whether it be by a faculty, a school, or even just a unit coordinator. That Student Assist team is really, really important, and we put a lot of funding, time and energy into that team. But of course, a lot of people don't know about that team, how to access that team. And so one of the things that we've done is create a new online form to access the team. They're now available by Skype for students that aren't on campus, particularly rural clinical students or students down in Albany. And more than anything, we've just tried to really promote that service as much as possible. And every now and then I'll get a reminder that we need to do even more to try and make sure that students understand what we do. We've also tried to do things, we've released the first annual report we've done in quite a while, and in that annual report we go through each area of what the Guild does and how students can benefit from our services. We've also done a breakdown of how we spend student services and amenities fees. One of the really important things in a universal fee context is that every student feels like they're getting return for the fees that they're paying. And of course, for part-time students, they're no exception. They might only pay a half SAF, but they still deserve a lot of services in return for that fee. And so what we've really tried to do is communicate where their money is going, what services are available, and how they can be accessed. But we still need to do a lot more, and your feedback's really useful, and certainly something I'll take into the office next week. So engagement's one thing. The next is representative structures. It's really important that we don't have all the same types of students all sitting on Guild Council, that we have departments and divisions of the Guild that are made up of different people. With respect to mature age students, that's something that we've really tried to focus on this year. So we've created the Mature Age Students Association, and they're going to start running a lot more engagement events to try and reach out to mature age students, as well as, of course, part-time mature age students who are coming back to university, who have very dynamic and special needs. Reaching out to parents on campus is very important. As you mentioned, with childcare, there are some very specific needs there that need to be addressed. But of course, in terms of part-time, I think the real challenge is making sure that we are getting feedback from part-time students, and the decisions we make are based on understanding of what challenges part-time students face. And certainly I'd encourage you and any other part-time students in the room to email me, president@guild.uwa.edu.au. It's all on the Guild website. I'm really keen to catch up with you for a coffee and just have a chat about your experience as a part-time student, because it's really important that we have that strong level of understanding and representation. So I hope that answers your question, and please do get in touch with me. I'd love to get some more of your thoughts. Cheers.
Cameron, at the eminently successful Guild cocktail party for past Guild council, there were some photographic panels. At bygone eras. Where have those panels ended up? Are they still in what we used to call the ref, or have they got a new home now?
No, I'm pleased to report they're still there and will remain there hopefully for quite some time. So that's one of the things we've really been trying to do, is recognise that cafes aren't just a place where you eat, it's part of the culture on campus, and so ensuring that we have a really good culture in each of our cafes is really important to us. So we've left those up there.
Any further questions for Cameron? If not, on your
Up
behalf...
the back, I think we've got one.
Right up the back.
My question was just picking up on your previous answer and recognising that mature age students and mothers who are also studying, or parents, might have their own challenges. I'm a mother with young children, and I have found that coming into campus, doing the usual tutorials and assignments can always be quite a struggle, especially because the semester, the way it's structured, it's not in sync necessarily with the term school timetable. So you've got the study breaks and the semester breaks, and you've got school holidays with kids, which completely throws it out of whack, and that can obviously adversely affect and impact on one's studies. Can you speak to the cultural developments or the awareness or the lack of awareness about some of these challenges that these particular students may be facing, and if there are any strategies in place that are there to sort of support these parents who are having these struggles, and what they can do to feel supported?
Sure. Thanks very much. Another great question. This is fantastic. One of my really close friends who was on Guild Council with me last year is an incredibly inspiring person, and she's a young mother studying. And getting to know her has really made me actually understand a lot of the challenges that are faced. I'll never fully understand, of course, but it's been a really great insight having such a close friend go through such a difficult time as a single mother, also studying at the same time. And I think that there's the little things we can do and there's the big things we can do. There's little things that we have strategies in place for, and a lot of that just comes out of awareness. For example, getting high chairs in Guild catering outlets, or trying to think of more available facilities for change rooms. Then there's the bigger things, the things that have a real impact on your education. And a lot of that comes down to something like the Student Assist team, making sure that the structure of university policies that are in place, the decisions made by the university, and the equity protocols that we currently have are sufficient to actually help students in that position actually get through that degree. And one of the things that the university is really eager is for us to play that role. And I actually had a meeting the other day with the Director of Student Services where he was saying, look, you're getting all these students coming through your Student Assist team, you've got a lot of student representatives lobbying on an education level. Have you got some data that you can show us? Like give us, share with us where our failings are and where we need to look at improving. And so a big strategy that we've got in that regard is to develop a long-term database in terms of student complaints and issues that's constantly maintained. One of the real challenges in a student guild with student representatives like myself running the show is that sometimes we have a tendency to reinvent the wheel every year. And so I'll go through and I'll have a really sort of defining experience with a friend or a student who comes and talks to me about a problem they're having, and I'll do all this stuff about it, and then I'll move on and the next person will have no understanding of what I've actually done. So what we're really working on is our information management. How do we roll over to make sure that the lessons we learn don't fall by the wayside, but are continuously built on? And I think particularly with mature age students and with student parents on campus, that's an area where we've probably let that information failure let us down. And I'm sure there have been some great initiatives in the past, but I honestly couldn't tell you what they've been. And so we now have a new database in place that will be handed over to every new guild president. We're committing resources to a research position that will create a nexus between our student assist team and our student representatives on an ongoing basis. And I'm really hopeful that through better information, we can actually deliver greater understanding to student representatives of what we need to be doing for those students and how we need to be fighting for their needs, pushing for academic policy that reflects their interests, and pushing for guidelines and student rights that will really help them in the long run. So I think that's really the strategy that we need to have. But I'll certainly take on board that there's a lot more we need to be doing than we currently are. And as I said to the previous gentleman, always very happy to catch up with you for coffee and have a bit of a chat about your experience.
There are no further questions. I'll thank
Thanks.
your copy. Item 7 on our agenda tonight is the Warden's report, and a full copy of my report can be seen in attachment D of the booklet. However, I just want to comment on a few of the major issues that the Council of Convocation has been addressing this year. We had a question earlier regarding our anniversary year, and as many of you will be aware, Convocation itself celebrated its 100th anniversary this year on the 4th of March. And this was commemorated with a celebratory photograph of 100 graduates at St George's Hall in Hay Street, thanks to an enthusiastic group from Convocation Council and the UWA Historical Society. We've also commissioned a history of Convocation, which is currently being compiled, and that will be released early next year. Since celebrating the anniversary of our founding, your council has been hard at work developing a strategic plan that we hope will ensure Convocation remains relevant and continues to fulfil its charter for the next century. As you may be aware, Convocation has been assigned 5 key roles in the UWA Act and statutes. These are summarised in your booklet: a representative role, a governance role, a contribution role, a membership role, and a promotion of excellence role. Over the past 100 years, the Convocation has ascribed different priorities to these roles. While the representative role has remained fairly constant, initially during the last century, the focus was very much on governance issues, which then gave way to the needs of graduates. And now, through the use of social media, there is a potential for greater interaction between graduates and the university to achieve beneficial outcomes. Part of the challenge we face in developing a strategic plan for Convocation is to achieve the right balance between these roles, and also to align prioritisation of these roles with the needs of the university at different periods of its development. To ensure that the correct balance is achieved for our current needs, what we have been doing is going through and working to dovetail our strategic planning with that of the university. As part of the university's strategic plan, the Vice-Chancellor has recently released a discussion paper titled UWA 2020, Preparing for Success, a copy of which is available on the website noted in my report. The Council has indicated its support for the proposals in a submission lodged today with the Vice-Chancellor's office, and full details of that are in the booklet. Another major initiative that we have been actively pursuing over the past 6 months is the introduction of electronic voting for Convocation and Senate elections. We believe that this initiative will result in greater online interaction with members of Convocation, an increased participation rate in the voting, a more timely response, especially for overseas members, while reducing the overall cost per vote. Following investigations into the viability of electronic elections, the Council of Convocation has approved use of the allocated funding for the employment of a project coordinator to investigate all the implications of electronic voting and to assist the statute committee representatives liaising with the university's General Counsel regarding the amendments required to the statutes to actually enable electronic voting. We look forward to keeping you informed of our progress on this initiative. Over the past 6 months, I'm also pleased to report that substantial progress has been made in improving collaboration with the Office of Development and Alumni Relations. As indicated in my introduction, since the first ordinary meeting this year, the university has appointed a new Associate Director of Alumni and Community Relations, Miss Brenda Tunier. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce Brenda and to ask her to say a few words about her new role and her hopes and aspirations for connecting with the graduates of UWA. Please welcome Brenda to the podium.
Thank you, Warden. I'm told you're new here for at least 10 years, so I expect to be the newly appointed Associate Director of Alumni Relations for some time. I have great hopes for graduate engagement at this extraordinary university. Most of my dreams haven't yet translated into action, but as the Warden recently reminded me, I celebrated 100 days in my new position not long ago. I have to say it's been a pleasure. I'm especially grateful to the Warden, to the officers of Convocation, and to other alumni leaders in the community who have welcomed me and helped me every day to understand this place, its people, and its history. I know that the people in this room tonight are UWA supporters and leaders. I don't have to tell you the value of involvement and contribution. That would be preaching to the converted. I do want to take the opportunity to reinforce to you how proud your university is of you, how appreciative of your efforts, and to tell you how important you are to UWA achieving our goals for the future. You are the face of UWA in the world. You are the ambassadors, the recruiters, the mentors, the conveners, and the donors. You and those who follow in your footsteps will make all the difference to UWA reaching the top 50 universities by 2050. My dream is that one day a vast majority of the over 100,000 UWA graduates will know without hesitation the value of connection with their university. That they will have found personally meaningful ways to work with and through UWA to make a difference in their communities and in the world. I look forward to working with the Warden and the Convocation Council to make that happen. For each of us, involvement starts somewhere, and for me, it started last fall, or actually last spring, because I came from Canada, and now it's spring again for me. Already, I'm a believer in the people of UWA. It is my great privilege to be part of the amazing things that I know we will accomplish together. And I look forward to getting to know all of you better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brenda. Another recent initiative of Convocation is the formation of an Honours Committee. As you will all be aware, while many of our colleagues may be worthy of an Australian honour, it's only when someone actually takes the time and effort to compile a submission on their behalf that they can be considered. In order to address this issue, the Council of Convocation has recently established a separate Honours Committee to take on the responsibility of nominating and preparing submissions required for those worthy of recognition to be considered by the Australian Honours Secretariat in Canberra. However, the success of this initiative depends on members of Convocation and the university community taking the first step by nominating those you believe should be considered for an Order of Australia. To ensure confidentiality, we've set up processes so that you can send through any nomination direct to me by the email in your booklet, warden@convocation.uwa.edu.au, and that will enable us to actually start the process of looking at nominating that person and investigating and preparing the background data required. It's often helpful if that nomination has a few names of people who know that person well that we can contact and ask them. Normally, most of those nominations are done on a confidential basis, so you often end up with a bit of subterfuge to find out the background of many of these individuals, but it's something which I'd ask you to give consideration to. On a national basis, Western Australia is often unrepresented when those awards are announced each year, and through initiatives like this we can hopefully redress that balance. Another initiative of the current council has actually been to establish a membership committee. That may seem to be a fairly basic act, but it's really to look at the implications of each membership category. In the booklet you'll notice that the current memberships of Convocation are all graduates of the university, which we've discussed tonight. All senior academic staff of the university are also eligible. All members and past members of the UWA Senate. And there's also a category in there for representatives of commercial, industrial, scientific, professional and educational organisations, which has lain dormant for many years. It also has a category for graduates, fellows, members, associates of universities, colleges and institutions duly authorised to grant degrees, diplomas, licences and certificates who are admitted to be members of Convocation. And again, we need to get the criteria right for that category. Another important one, of course, is persons who have rendered service or made donations to the university are all eligible for membership of Convocation. We expect that the arrangements for these criteria will be considered by the Council of Convocation later this year. In closing, what I'd like to also refer to is Convocation's centenary gift to the university, which is the Sean Tan designed sundial, Ours to Sunset, which is located on the western wall of this building. And I had the pleasure of representing Convocation on Friday the 12th of April, when Sean Tan was able to fly across from sunny Melbourne to come to a fairly overcast day in Perth to celebrate his new sundial. Unfortunately, he didn't see it in operation because the sun didn't actually come out at that time. However, I wish to thank everyone responsible for Convocation's contribution to this event and the centenary gift. Like my predecessors, I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any specific issues that anyone wishes to raise regarding Convocation and the report that's in there. Well, let off lightly. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda tonight is item 8, the Convocation Officer's Report. I won't call on Juanita to present that because this is a report as required in the UWA statutes, which simply contains a list of graduates who have become, their current whereabouts have become unknown to the Convocation Office since the last ordinary meeting in March. This year we've arranged the list by faculty and year, so hopefully that'll make it a lot easier for you to glance down and see if there are any colleagues you know who may have shifted address and failed to notify the university. Please have a look at this list, and if you do know the whereabouts of any of those, the Convocation Office would welcome that knowledge. Juanita Perez, the Convocation Officer, can be contacted at the Office of Convocation at the email address there or on the phone numbers that are provided. The penultimate item tonight, item 9 on our agenda, is the Independent Audit Report, and that is contained in your information at attachment F, as required again by statute. Item 10 relates to other business, and I know that a couple have approached me, and we do have a couple of items of other business. I'll start with one of which we've had forewarning, and that was a request from a member, Margaret Pinchback, who is unable to be present this evening, but asked that submitted a question which she wished to have addressed under other business, and her question relates to the university motto. She asked, when was the university motto changed from Seek Wisdom to Achieve International Excellence? And she expressed her concern if this change had been initiated. I'm pleased to advise that there has been no change to the university's motto, Seek Wisdom. It has remained on the university crest since its inception. The Achieve International Excellence tagline under the crest was introduced approximately 10 years ago as a marketing branding device to support the university's aspirational goal of becoming one of the world's top 50 universities by 2050. The goal was set around the turn of the century, along with an interim goal of becoming one of the top 100 universities in the world by our centenary year 2013. As we've heard earlier this evening, the interim goal was achieved in 2012 and approved upon this year. As indicated in the Vice-Chancellor's report, recent world rankings have confirmed the university as one of the top 100 in the world at 91 out of, I understand, 10,000 universities worldwide, and number 4 in Australia, which is a very credible result. Now, other business items, there have been a couple who indicated they would like to raise an item. Joan.
Warden, several of us on the Historical Society are seeking relatives and descendants of the first students, the first Senate, the first staff, and the first members of Convocation who clearly were ad random gradum because there were no graduates as yet from this state. I have here a list of 183 students, the 15 staff, the 18 members of the Senate, and the 83 members who attended the first meeting of Convocation. If any of you know anyone who's a granddaughter or a great niece, we have several 90-year-old women who are the daughters of original members on this list, but there are a lot more people out there. It is taking ages to try and find, as you can imagine, especially given the fact that in 1914, let's face it, 183 students in 1913, but 99 of them went to war. The blokes went to war. 16 were killed. In the first graduation ceremony, where graduates from this university were granted a degree, there were 11 graduates. Only 3 were men, 8 were women. Now, you know how hard it is to find women when married names are involved. Please, if you could let me, Joan Pope, Fran Pessage, or the Warren, or Juanita, if you don't mind, taking yet more messages. We would very much like to get this sorted out as soon as we can. Thank you.
Joan, can I suggest that perhaps we put that list, we'll put it on the website, and people who are interested in that can go through and look at that so that they can perhaps... Any other items of other business? We had the one on the Acrod bays earlier, I think.
The provision of Acrod bays is the university or Convocation, I guess, addressing Convocation. Do they see that as a priority? Do they see it as a contentious or topical issue that needs addressing?
I've had many queries since I've become the Warden of Convocation, but not one about the Acrod bays. But my understanding is that the university meets all the requirements in the number of bays on that site, unless there is different information. I'm not an expert in that particular area with regard to the university, but I am aware of the regulations and standards that pertain to that.
My concern is mostly about the location of the Acrod bays, further away than normal core bays. In fact,
normally it's the opposite.
It's the opposite.
Yeah.
And it is at shopping centres, it is at various organisations that fall under the jurisdiction of Acrod bound policies. So I'm assuming the university falls under that same banner, and if so, why are the Acrod bays not visible, not being here close by where?
I'm happy to take that question on notice, and I'll have some discussions after the meeting and get the details and then follow up on that. I think would be the best way to handle that. Any other questions under other business? Sorry, ladies first.
No Acrod access to Lawrence Wilson Gallery.
Right, okay. I'll take that on notice and we'll follow that up as well.
I'd like to briefly raise the matter of the university's plans to sell up its Underwood Avenue bushland. Can you hear me?
Do you want the microphone? We have a mic that's...
My name's Eric Wilson. I'm an agricultural graduate.
Not working.
I don't think it's on, Eric.
You need batteries.
It says it's on. Talk directly into it.
My name's Eric Wilson. I'm an agricultural graduate from back in the 50s. I've had a lifelong interest in the environment of Western Australia and watched it sadly falling away over the years. And
I'm afraid that what the university plans to do with selling off this bit of bushland is going to be just another bit of environmental vandalism that's characterised what's been going on in Western Australia since the first settlers arrived. This bit of bushland, the Underwood Avenue bushland, is the remnant of a truly beautiful and unique bit of country that has got something like 1,500 plant species, not seen anywhere else. And if that goes, it'll be a disaster for those. It will also be a disaster for Carnaby's black cockatoo. There are very few black cockatoos left in Western Australia, and the Underwood Avenue bushland is a very important part of their the need that they have to survive because of its particular vegetation and so on. So if that's sold off, we'll be doing a lot to finish off, destroy this unique species. And I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but I would like to move that this meeting of Convocation ask the university not to sell the Underwood Avenue bush.
I'm not sure there's anyone here who can give you all the details this evening, but again, I'm happy to take that on, find out the answer and come back to you if I may. So I'll certainly follow that up after the meeting. Hillary.
Warren, can I ask that Colin Campbell-Fraser actually spoke to that, because I think he does have quite a few facts.
Cam, would you like to address the issue?
I'm not sure whether I'm the appropriate person. I've obviously preferred an executive member of the university to address the issue, but having worked with the university for many years in and around that proposal to develop the project, with respect to Eric, was it Eric? Not Eric, my apologies, Eric, is that there are several significant misunderstandings or errors in your articulation of the situation. The land itself was originally used as farmland. Whilst many people think of it now as being a once pristine environment, it may have been so thousands, 100 years ago. Since the university's had it, it's been a research station. To cut to the quick, the university has complied over many years with all the EPA requirements in terms of its studies in relation to it. The black cockatoos have been shown to not inhabit that area. They fly through it. They don't use it as a feeding station. Eric, you would understand that most of the problems with the black cockatoos have been caused by the reduction in farmland, which you may or may not have been involved in early in life and trying to redeem. So that it is a complex issue, but without the sort of boring complication, can I say that my personal view is that the university had a significant asset. It belongs to the university, it's for educational purposes. Any income from that, various executives and vice-chancellors over the years have undertaken to turn the money straight into education. It's not to be spent ad hoc. So my view is, as a graduate, is that we would be denying future generations of a valuable education if we do not utilise an asset within the bounds of the law, which the university is doing. Yeah. Just to come back to the balanced situation, the university has conceded that it would protect at least 1/3 of that land for environmental purposes. There have been proposals put up to create an Indigenous cultural centre of some sort to balance the needs of the Indigenous historically who used to travel through that area, and there were some significant aspects related to that. So I think the university has been totally moral in trying to achieve what its charter was with that asset given to the state more than 100 years ago, and I think we shouldn't be seduced, if you like, by what is, my personal view is that there's a severe misunderstandings of the true situation. And I'm sure that through Warren, if you want to take it up through Warren, post the event, you'll get a good understanding. There are documents this high about environmental impacts, the understandings of the environmental aspects that are available to see. I'm sorry if I've confused you, but I think that's my understanding of the highlight of this situation. I'm happy to take any questions later about that.
Thank you very much, Ken. Are there any other items of general business?
Just to follow on from that, I mean, the fact that there's a huge body of information about something doesn't necessarily mean the contrary is true. It's not the quantity, it's the quality of what's being put forward. So you need to be careful of that. Maybe this man's right. So he's taken the time to express it.
Thank you for that comment. Any other items that anyone wishes to raise under other business?
I think you've got a question or comment there.
What years were it alleged that there were farms in that area? I used to ride horse around there in the bush, so when were the farms there?
I shall defer to your greater knowledge now.
Well, the university uses an agricultural research project, and that there was used as a farm there. I mean, Alan Robson is an expert of that area. Eric, you may know him, previous Vice-Chancellor. You only have coffee with him and he'll take you right through.
I was there, and it was a very small area.
Well, you know,
I'm a few experimental plots.
I think we're certainly happy to facilitate the exchange of information, so rather than prolong the meeting tonight, we'll get the information so that everyone's fully informed of those issues, if I may. If there's no other items of general business, I will declare this second ordinary meeting of Convocation for 2013 closed at 7:11 this evening. It's now my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for this evening, His Honour Justice James Edelman. Justice Edelman was appointed to the Supreme Court of Western Australia in July 2011 as one of the youngest practitioners to take on that role. He is a member of Convocation, having obtained his degrees of Bachelor of Economics in 1995, Bachelor of Laws with First Class Honours in 1996, as well as a Bachelor of Commerce from Murdoch University in 1997. He was Associate to His Honour Justice Toohey of the High Court of Australia in 1997 and completed his articles with Blake Dawson Warden. He was admitted to practice in Western Australia in 1998. Justice Edelman was awarded a Rhodes Scholarship in 1998 and obtained a Doctor of Philosophy in Law in 2001 from the University of Oxford. He then took up a teaching position at Keble College, Oxford, in 2005 and was appointed Professor of the Law of Obligations at Oxford in 2008. He practised as a barrister at the chambers of Mr Malcolm McCusker QC in Perth from 2001 and at One Essex Court at the English Bar from 2008. It is therefore my pleasure to introduce His Honour Justice James Edelman, who will tonight speak on the challenges for university education in the next century. Please welcome Justice Edelman.
Thank you very much, Warren. It's a great honour to be invited to speak to you all tonight at the second ordinary meeting of Convocation. I've been involved with quite a number of universities over the last 23 years and teaching in one capacity or another at many universities for the last 20 of those years. But whenever I come here, it does feel very much like coming back home. And I think most of us here probably feel the same way. The ultimate point that I want to make this evening is why we all feel that way and why it's so important. What I want to speak about this evening is the challenges, or particularly the one major challenge for universities in the next century. An apocryphal, probably untrue story about Bill Gates was that in the early 1980s, he was asked about the future of computing, And he responded that no one will ever need more than 640 kilobytes of memory for a computer. Now, as we all know, now most people need about 1 million times that amount of memory. The short point is that it's very, very dangerous to try to address a topic that talks about the future of technology in the next 10 or 20 years, let alone the future in the next 100 years. But that's a challenge that I want to deal with this evening, and just in relation to really one point, which is online education. The future challenges that technology presents for education were really noticed as early as 1913 by Thomas Edison. And Thomas Edison predicted that the future of education would be the motion picture. He said that education would be developed and people would be educated in the future by the motion picture. That view may still turn out to be correct, but I think for the most part at the moment, most people think that he was wrong. But his insight was correct. And the insight was that technology is something that offers great potential to transform the way we think about education. And at no time in history, I think, has that been more true than it is today. Let me just start with saying a few things about demographic change to university education. During our lifetimes, I think we've seen quite a significant demographic change in university educations. One example, just at University of Western Australia, is that we've seen the size of the university expand from a few thousand students only as recently as in the 1960s or 70s to more than 24,000 students today. The University of Sydney, another example, has expanded from in the 1920s or 30s several thousand students to now having more than 50,000 students. Participation rates in universities across Australia have also dramatically increased. In the last 15 years, participation rates in universities have increased by about 10% to, on one assessment, around 30% of the population. But although university education is becoming more prolific, the proportion of the population and the demographic distribution of the population is still a cause for some concern, not just within this country, but across countries. So a child who is born today in Finland will have something like 240 times more chance of obtaining a university education than a child who is born today in Mozambique. A study by Richard James in 2000, and which still roughly applies today, has shown that students or children that are born to lower socioeconomic backgrounds have half the chance of being university educated than children who are born to higher socioeconomic backgrounds. The transformation in education, in primary, secondary and tertiary education that's possible by technology has the potential radically to change this within countries and across countries. And online education is the epitome of that. As internet access is expanding, companies led by Microsoft or Google making internet access available online right across developing countries, the developing world is coming online and being given the opportunity to engage with online education initiatives, such as that which Professor Cameron's mentioned briefly tonight, which was possibly developed or innovated by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Harvard with their first open online courses a number of years ago. These courses are now becoming very widespread. They're known by the acronym MOOCs, Massive Open Online Courses. They're usually almost always free. They're made available by more than 100 universities across the world. Last week, the New York Times published a story about a 15-year-old boy from Mongolia called Batashig. This is in a country where a third of the population is nomadic. This boy was quite fortunate to have a teacher who was the first Mongolian in history to have been educated at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He encouraged the students in his class to enrol in one of these massive open online courses. And the course was filmed, it's broadcast for free on the internet. His students had internet access. And one of his students, this boy Batashig, enrolled in the course. Now the course that the students enrolled in was a course, a technical course on aspects of electrical engineering. 150,000 students across the world enrolled in that course. 340 of the 150,000 obtained a perfect score. And one of those 340 was Batashig. And this is in a country and where he was sitting the course in a second language. Not only do these massive open online courses offer vast potential for developing world and developing countries, but as the Guild presidents mentioned tonight, even within universities, technology is now being used to make lectures, courses available on a far wider basis to students that wouldn't otherwise be able to attend lectures. So, for example, the recording of lectures makes lectures available to part-time students who work, to mothers who have difficulty attending lectures because of maternity commitments. And it's an opportunity that is spread, not just in the tertiary sector, but also in the primary and secondary sector. Recently, Rupert Murdoch announced that he was going to continue to fund and support one of his companies, his Amplify business, and significantly support it despite the fact that it's been losing something like $180 million a year. The reason is because that business, which is involved very heavily in online education, is seen by him and by many others to be one of the futures for educational initiatives. I mentioned primary and secondary education. An example in primary education that I've recently become acquainted with is a program called Reading Eggs, which, without a teacher, educates students or children from ages of 3 up to 7 or 8 on a very highly individualised basis. It offers the opportunity for online education on a wide free scale that's never before been contemplated. There are also millions of online blogs, discussion groups, chat rooms on subjects ranging from everything from everyday carry, which is a discussion group of analysis of things that people carry in their pockets, to a blog which is concerned exclusively with Fermat's last theorem. I mean, I'm a member of blogs and discussion groups which range on a number of, unfortunately, only legal topics, but from subjects like the law of restitution, which is one of my interests, which a judicial colleague of mine described slightly sarcastically as the subject of why people should give things back that they should never have had in the first place, to constitutional law and legal history. But with the incredible opportunities that these online education gives, particularly free online education, there's a very large question that sits behind that. And that question is, what is the remaining role for a university? Now let me start with what I think the remaining role is not. And the remaining role, the answer is not that the universities are about simply delivering an outcome. It's not that university provides a commodity or a degree, which is a passport to a better career. It certainly does do that, but that is not the ultimate aim. And I think commoditisation of education misunderstands the fundamental role of a university. Last year there were 125 students, almost all the students in a large class at Harvard University, that were accused of cheating on a final exam. Although the immediate cause and responsibility must lie for that with the students themselves, there was an editorial in the Boston Globe that speculated on what the wider causes of that difficulty and that what was said to be a more widespread phenomenon might be. The editorial speculated that this is, and that referring to plagiarism and cheating, is an inevitable result of today's educational marketplace, in which a college education has become a transaction, a means of earning a degree for your resume, rather than a place to explore the life of the mind. So what is the answer then? What is the answer to what may be seen by some as a threat to university education and the future of universities, that is the potentials of online and free online education? Ironically, I think with all the vast benefits that online education can deliver, the challenge for universities in the 21st century will not be just to focus on the delivery of that online education, but to focus on just the opposite. Sure, to deliver the online education and to make courses on online education as widely available as possible, but the core focus of a university ought to be on those things that are not online. And the most fundamental of these, and the most fundamental point that I want to make this evening, is that it's about personal interchange. One example where there is a possibility of losing sight of the need for personal interchange within universities themselves that I've mentioned is the delivery of lectures and seminars. Recording of lectures across Australia, as it is across the United States, is now becoming more and more standard. However, there's significant anecdotal evidence that as lectures are recorded, student numbers dive. The question that students may start asking themselves, if the delivery of lectures is simply by an online recorded technique that a student could watch in the privacy of their own home, is why should we pay for a university education at all? Why come to a university and attend a lecture which either might be free online at home or might be simply provided by a university as an online technique of learning? The answer to this question, and the answer to the broader question, is to focus again on the interpersonal exchange that a university has to offer. In relation to teaching, for example, the recording of lectures, although important, should never be a substitute for the Socratic teaching method. I first made this suggestion at a forum on the future of law schools last year, and a very senior former member of UWA Law School, with almost a lifetime in university education, remarked to me that suggestions that education in universities ought to be delivered as often as possible in a Socratic manner are elitist and unaffordable. I have a grave fear that if someone, and this is a person who I have great respect for, with almost a lifetime in university education and teaching, can truly believe those remarks, then there may be many others that think in that way. First, let me say something about the suggestion that Socratic education is elite. In my view, it's a betrayal of the fundamental goal of a university to suggest that it's somehow objectionable to lead a person's mind to an elite level, or that it's somehow a criticism of a teacher that he or she inspires a person to think in an elite manner, that is, to think in a way and to inspire someone to think in a way that others do not. The etymology of the word education is from decere, to lead. It's the metaphor of a teacher leading a student through a journey of discovery. And that, I think, is the epitome of the Socratic education. The creation of an elite or a superior mind should never be something that's ever feared or condemned by a university. It ought to be the goal of every teacher, every faculty and every university. Our university's goal is to seek wisdom. Wisdom is not something that is encouraging everyone to think the same way. That's not the way wisdom is achieved. It's not achieved by what John Kenneth Galbraith disparagingly described as conventional wisdom. Secondly, let me say something about the objection as to cost. The view that it's too costly to deliver a Socratic education, I think, confuses the ability of a teacher with the cost of delivery. Without a doubt, Socratic education is going to be harder in larger classes. As universities grow and as class size inevitably grows, it makes the delivery of a Socratic personal interchange style of teaching harder and harder. One problem with every style of education at the primary level, secondary and the tertiary level today is class size. I was fortunate enough to have been educated at Oxford, which is one of the 2 universities in the world which has a systematic style at its core of teaching in groups of 1, 2, or even there it's starting to blow out to groups of 3 or 4. But Oxford and Cambridge do that at vast cost. The cost of delivering that style of education to groups like that is enormous. The cost is not just financial. As somebody who's delivered the same tutorial for 8 hours in a row to small groups, I can also say it takes a mental toll. but the tutors and the fellows that deliver that believe in the system so much that they believe that it's, in Oxford and Cambridge, that there must be ways, and they have developed ways to innovate, to keep the system alive and to try to fund the system. However, it's not necessary that groups of 2 or 3 or 4 be the only way that a Socratic education is delivered. Contrary to the view that was delivered to me last year at this seminar that I spoke at, I think it is very possible for, even in a seminar of 50 students, for a truly Socratic exchange to take part. Despite the brilliant experience of tiny Socratic tutorials that I had, probably the most dynamic experience that I ever had at a university was in a class of 50 students. That class was led by a former mentor of mine, who's the late Peter Burks. And Peter Burks was a man who could quite comfortably teach a class of 50 students where every student, he would know every student's name by the 3rd or the 4th week. He would keep photographs with the students' names on their back until he'd memorised them. But he would deliver the teaching in such a way that every student felt that he was engaging directly with him or her. And not only that, but a former colleague of mine once described the experience as everyone in the room feeling like they were engaged in a massive game of chess where the teacher was always one move ahead. And he says, the only bit we didn't realise was he was actually 6 moves ahead. But you don't need to be a brilliant teacher to be able to teach in that Socratic way. Some of the classes that I teach, one of the classes I teach here, on the first day of class, I just ask students to turn over a piece of paper, to fold it, and to put their names on it. For the rest of the term, even if I can't remember a student's name, it's sitting there glaring out at me. But I've only spoken for the moment about the Socratic method of delivery of lectures, seminars, and tutorials. There are many other ways that universities can encourage and develop an interpersonal exchange with students. Related to the Socratic style of teaching is the importance of engaged and collaborative research. The goal of University of Western Australia, as we've heard this evening, is to be placed in the world's top 50 universities. This requires academics to engage with others all across the world. An academic should never stand still. Conferences, collaborations, academic exchanges, engagement with the professions, all of these are the marks and important marks of an interpersonal dynamic university model. Nor is Socratic teaching the only example of personal interchange for students. For example, interchange with the most elite students. And again, contrary to the view that had been expressed to me, I use elite in the most positive of ways. But interchange with those elite students in programs such as supervisions, honours students, master's students, or perhaps most positively, the recent BPhil innovation, where the University of Western Australia has brought together the very best of the very best students after school to come to university, spend time together debating, discussing and engaging in a very particular advanced form of degree. And finally, at the most basic level, it ought to be about encouraging students to think of a university as a place to be, rather than just as an online opportunity to learn. It is a physical place of exchange. Let me conclude then with an analogy and an explanation for why I think universities have nothing to fear from the potentially radical transformative change to education that is the potential for free online education, and instead why universities perhaps have a great deal to gain from it. In any study of 19th century academic advances, perhaps one of the greatest claims to have made one of the most significant advances can be laid with Charles Darwin. And at the heart of Darwin's work was this concept of natural selection, which, as we all know, Herbert Spencer's described as misleadingly as survival of the fittest. But in Darwin's extraordinary study of natural selection, there was one huge puzzle. And that huge puzzle was the presence of cooperation and altruism in nature. How was Darwin able to explain, or how could natural selection explain the behaviour of, for example, the sentry gazelle, who alerts the herd to the prowling lion by springing up again and again taking the lion's attention off the herd, but directing the lion's attention to that gazelle itself. Or the amoeba that builds a stalk from its own body, sacrificing itself so that another amoeba can be carried away to food supplies by a passing insect. Or a bird that calls to its companions to warn of the impending approach of a cat, thereby attracting attention to itself. For many years, this altruism in nature was a great puzzle of biological science. The point of my speech this evening is that the answer to this puzzle is also the answer to the potential future of education. In 1973, John Maynard Smith and George Price published a paper in the journal Nature where they posed an answer to this puzzle. Their thesis has become what known as, in game theory, is what's often described as the hawk-dove game. As a mathematical theory, it can explain both antagonism and cooperation. So, with the example of the warning call by the bird who sees the cat approaching, the bird places itself at far greater risk in order to save the others. But this so-called altruistic behaviour, as Smith and Price explain, is based on repeated games. In other words, the apparent altruism of the bird who warns the others usually has a payoff, and the payoff is the future altruism of a bird who's saved by the call, or another bird who learns that this is ultimately the best way for protection of them all. So the behaviour, on one view, is not truly altruistic. The bird behaves in a cooperative manner because its actions are based on a broad and far-sighted approach to life, beyond immediate gain to itself, although with knowledge of the potential of long-term gain. The major challenges which are faced by universities as the result of technological developments ought to be answered by what might appear to be the same type of altruistic approach. In other words, universities have got nothing to fear by massive free online educational resources, but instead they can use this apparent altruism to expand and enhance their reputation and student interest. The way to do this is by keeping sight of the core role of a university in offering an interpersonal educational experience. Now, it may be that that interpersonal experience will come with a significant price tag, but I think it is the only way the universities can provide the unique educational model that has not been bettered for 2,500 years. I didn't tell you the conclusion to the story about Batashig from Mongolia. After he achieved a perfect score in MIT's massive online course, he applied for admission to MIT after graduation, and he was admitted. He's now studying at MIT, and his Facebook page shows him with the renowned physics professor, Walter Lewin. And Walter Lewin is someone who part of his lecture is on my own Facebook page, where he, as a physics professor, performs perhaps one of the most engaging Socratic stunts in a classroom, where he stands, and to demonstrate the conservation of energy, he stands on a wall and lets go of a giant metal ball and stands there and waits to see if the ball will return and kill him. He quite literally places his educational beliefs ahead of his life. Universities have the potential to offer so much to so many, but the interpersonal university experience can still touch the minds of students in ways that online technology never will. George Price himself knew this. Towards the end of his life, George Price spent more and more time amongst the homeless, living amongst them and helping them. At his funeral in 1975, there were only 10 people present. And his biographer tells of how two of them were two of the premier evolutionary scientists in the world, and the other 8 were homeless. Even without digesting the mathematics of George Price, I think we can all aspire to the cooperation, the interpersonal exchange that will make our university even greater and will, I believe, assist us to achieve our goal of being in the top 50 in the world. Along the way, we'll educate on a wide scale, all of those ranging from Nobel Prize winners to the homeless, although two groups which are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I now invite the Deputy Warden of Convocation, Paul McCann, to offer a vote of thanks for this speaker this evening. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Honourable Justice James Edelman, thanks very much for answering that question, challenges for university education in the 21st century. I think that we'd safely say that we had an insight there that was unexpected, because nobody knows what is coming into the future and so on. So I think the way you've characterised it there on the way students learn and what universities will provide is a very valuable way of reassuring us that we'll still exist into the future. I think technology developments and demographics are certainly changing along the way. These will provide opportunities and challenges. You remarked that university had remaining roles, whereas I think that probably might be a little harsh, consider it as remaining role. I think that the personal interchange you referred to while you're at university for everyone, whether you're graduates university or the staff or the undergraduates, will see parallels that we see in Convocation, where we maintain the opportunity for interchange and the development of lifelong learning. So I think that it will be here with us for quite a while. I can help you with one thing, and that is, did Gates actually go to 640k or not? To strengthen the myth by repeating it, the way I heard it was that they were doing all their research and development on 16k of memory. That's all that was. That was a vast quantity. And when he said, what will it be in the future? They said, well, we'll double it. And we'll double it again. So he went from 16 to 32 to 64. And then he said, and we'll multiply it by 10. Hence the 640, which isn't a square of anything, but always intrigued me. So that might be true, might not be. But nonetheless, on behalf of we fellow members of Convocation and the guests who are here tonight, I'd like to thank you for your observations this evening, and as a mark of our thanks, we'd just like to give you a little gift. There you go. First case, seeking wisdom. Something to have with the favourite tea.
Thanks very much, Paul. Simply remains for me to thank you for attending the second ordinary meeting of Convocation this year. I look forward to keeping you up to date with developments in Convocation as they occur before we meet again at the next ordinary meeting. I'd like to thank Tracy Taylor, the convener of our outreach committee, as well as Juanita Perez and Chris Gorham in the Convocation office for all their efforts in organising this meeting, the second ordinary meeting for 2013. Drinks and supper are now available in the area outside the auditorium. Please stay and catch up with friends and colleagues, and thank you once again for coming. Good evening.